Originally published in 1993 under the title Black Ships Before Troy, it was then reprinted in this 2014 edition with the far less unique and accurate title of the Iliad, in addition to replacing the cover image with something more exciting, but also far less representative of the kind of story it is. These are issues on the publisher's side and have no bearing on what is otherwise an excellent retelling of the Trojan War from author Rosemary Sutcliffe and illustrator Alan Lee. They then followed it up in 1995 with a perhaps even slightly better retelling of the Odyssey, originally titled The Wanderings of Odysseus. There are few people who do children's retellings of myths and legends better than Rosemary Sutcliffe, and she's done tons. Both as a storyteller and a faithful adapter, she's one of my favorites. In terms of the adaptation, as is pretty much the standard, this isn't just a retelling of Homer's Iliad. It also uses other classical sources to provide a fuller story, starting with the golden apple at the wedding and ending with the fall of Troy, but also some details throughout, e.g. Achilles' more well-known cause of death than his Homeric one. Whenever you read any retellings of any story, personal opinions on how it should be told always crop up, and while this one's no exception, there were times when I felt she made some small odd choices in terms of which version of events she uses, her interpretations, specific details, as well as some structural editorial type things, but her own alterations are far more minimal and appropriate than I usually find with retellings, except for one chapter in the Iliad where she has changed how events played out, mostly just details, it's not significant, but it did stand out as bizarrely unnecessary, particularly because otherwise she is remarkably faithful in her retelling. And the Odyssey was even stronger and more refined, though that could be because it's a much easier story to tell. However, obviously these are 130-page abridgments written for a younger audience, so with the Iliad in particular, there are tons of fantastic big and little things that have had to be cut. But as far as that goes, it is an outstanding retelling and abridgment. For a first exposure to these stories, it is absolutely comprehensive enough, because even though it's only 130 pages, the thing about the original epics is that a lot of the length is made up of long-winded tedium, whereas these hit all the important beats just more swiftly. So for anyone wanting to read the stories for the first time, or someone who just wants a refresher, these are a really solid option. Both the text and images treat the stories seriously with due reverence and, most important of all, just capture the exact right feel of the originals. Which is why, even though they're marketed as children's books, it would be more accurate to say they're for anyone over 10. They have equal appeal to an adult reader. One of the reasons why I love Rosemary Sutcliffe's retellings is because of her style and prose. She doesn't write down to children in a patronizing way. The prose and language have a wonderful, timeless storytelling style, like this is the sort of book that's meant to be told out loud. The only objectionable content for younger readers is that the text doesn't pull any punches with the violence. Not in any graphic or detailed way, but it does state the acts of some pretty brutal deaths. The illustrations also depict some dead bodies and blood, the blinding of the Cyclops being particularly gruesome. Interestingly, there are also chapter book versions of these that don't have any of the illustrations. They have a higher page count, but I've never fully looked through them, so I can't definitively tell how the text differs or if there's anything extra. However, I don't suspect that's the case based on a digital preview of the first few pages, which have the exact same text as the illustrated editions. Really, the reason these versions exist is so schools can buy class copies more conveniently. For anyone else, there's no reason you'd want that version, but if you go to buy the books online, just make sure you're ordering the illustrated editions, because that's kind of the point of the books. Particularly because the abundance of the illustrations is fantastic. This isn't one of those cheap, one image per 10 pages kind of illustrated editions, except for maybe a dozen pages in each. Every one features illustration. They're in Alan Lee's usual soft, dreamy style. My all-time favorite Iliad and Odyssey illustrations are those by Martin and Alice Provenson for Golden Books. I adore the style, but they are very stylized. Whereas I also appreciate Alan Lee's realism as an alternative to that. He's clearly done his research and given the designs a sense of historical, or at least cultural, accuracy that helps readers envision the stories more immersively. Though one really weird mistake with the illustrations I noticed is how sometimes Achilles has blonde hair and other times black. Given the book's been in print for over 20 years, I don't see how that hasn't been corrected. Lastly, keep an eye out for the next review, which will be on In Search of a Homeland, the story of the Aeneid. It's not by the same author or illustrator, but the publisher clearly intended for it to be a follow-up on these books.